Hey guys, today I have a walk-in Wednesday. I actually have three bring back gun. I did that. Three, three bring back guns. One is just the gun, and the other two are an assembly that I want to show you. But before I do, today is Wednesday. It is a walk-in Wednesday. These things did walk in the door. But it's also tomorrow is Thanksgiving, and I am so thankful to have this job where I enjoy coming into work and finding fun things like I'm going to show you today. I'm thankful for our subscribers and our patrons. Just thank you so much. I've had a great year. When I compare last Thanksgiving with this Thanksgiving, a world of difference. Last Thanksgiving, I had very few family members over, and we actually ate outside on the deck. It was about 48, 50 degrees. We were shivering through our meal. Everything was stone cold within the first 15 minutes. This year, we're going to have more family members over, and we can eat inside where it's warm. Now, where you are, I know throughout Europe and Australia, things are actually turning to more lockdowns. I hope things get better for you soon, but it would be great if you could let us know what you're thankful for this year. Go to the comments between last Thanksgiving and this Thanksgiving. What has changed in your life? What blessings have you experienced? And share them with all of us just to give us something to read and something encouraging through the Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays. Now, one other thing about Europeans in lockdown, it reminds me that I wanted to give you a little teaser. At the SOS show, that's the Louisville, Kentucky show in February, Legacy is going to have a party this year. We do set up a table, and I've often said, hey, it'd be great to have a party back at our hotel. And so we're going to do that this year. I'm hoping that the lockdowns will be over internationally so that some of you could come from overseas. Come to the show, again, Louisville, Kentucky in February. I'll give you more information later, but we are going to have a Legacy party, and you want to be sure to attend if you can. Now it's time for our first bring back gun for today, and this is a P-38, obviously. It's kind of special, and it does have a bring back paper. I'm going to show this to you a little bit more up close and explain a little bit about it. But first, let me give you a little background on the P-38. I've talked about P-38s before. I know we have P-38 collectors out there who always say, show me more P-38s. Obviously, the original design was by Walther, and it's a Model 38, which means the patent went through in 1938. And they started making the first contracts, and interestingly, they made contracts for Sweden and other countries, contracts for other countries by 39, but the German military didn't adopt the P-38 as their weapon of choice until early 1940. So most of you know that. Here's the AC-40, what they look like, and then AC-41. So AC was the Walther factory code. However, Mauser licensed for the production of these as well because the German military wanted more. The Luger, some of you will defend the Luger to your dying breath, and I'm not bad-mouthing the Luger, but the truth is it had a lot of moving parts, it's a little more complicated, and it was definitely more expensive. So the German army was looking for an alternative. Walther came up with the design, and in 1942, Mauser ceased production of the Luger, and you guys know the BYF-42. You've seen those before. Many of them are Black Widows, by the way. And then the BYF-42 P-38, here's a picture of one. That was the first year of production. So they went from Luger production to P-38 production in 1942 at the Mauser factory. Now, you also know that BYF was the factory code, but have you heard of the SVW code? Let's take a look at this one. So for some unknown reason to me, they changed the factory code in 1945. So it was BYF, you know they go 42 all the way up to BYF 44. And then in 45, they changed the factory code to SVW. Again, I don't know the reason. The Waffen stamp stays the same at Waffen 135. You'll see it here on the frame. And also you see very lightly struck 2 Waffen 135 military acceptance stamps, and then the one in the middle is the test firing proof, and that is the Eagle from the Nazi era. Now this is a dual tone. Many of these later war BYFs were dual tone. You can hardly tell it's dual tone. And sometimes when you're at a show, you're not sure. The SVWs, by the way, did come in all blue. Those are very rare. They came in all phosphate. I have a picture of one here. So the SVW45 also came in all phosphate. This one is dual tone. I mentioned it's hard to tell sometimes. This just looks like a dull blued finish, but it is in fact a darker phosphate. They do have lighter phosphates, and here's a couple examples of the lighter phosphate. You can tell right away. Usually the grip strap is the best place to tell because it's pretty thin right through there. But the best way for me to see the contrast, I don't want to pull an Alec Baldwin here, but I wanted to show you right here the contrast between the slide and the barrel. The barrel is blued, and that's why they call it a dual tone. This is blued. This top cover looks like it's blued, and then all the other parts, including the small parts, take a look at that. The magazine release, that's phosphated. This will probably have, sometimes these will have a phosphated magazine. They're kind of rare. This is a Mauser magazine because you can see the Eagle 135, but this would go to an earlier gun. This was probably post-factory. Somebody numbered that. I don't know what that would be. I haven't seen that before, but it does look like a post-factory etching, maybe done with an electronic pencil. The grips are the correct black grips that were on the late war Mausers. And this came with capture papers. So I've done a video before on capture papers, and this one checks off all the boxes. Remember, I said every capture paper I've ever seen other than one, and the one that I saw that didn't fit this rule, so to speak, I think was fake. But they all are post-war. So September of '45, Corporal John Porter had this gun. They could have picked it up during their travels through Europe. But I believe most of them in the battle and carrying everything with them in their backpack didn't pick up a lot of these guns until the war was over. Then they're sitting around bored waiting for a transport ship home. There was a big backlog of people trying to get home. And so they started buying and trading and picking up guns. And every capture paper that I saw that was legit was post-war, meaning the war ended in April. In September of '45, he sent this home. It's the font on the typewriter looks all correct, and it is signed by his commanding officer, in this case, a first lieutenant. So this is the capture paper that goes with this gun. By the way, they made about 15,000 of these in 1945. The F block, notice this is the E block. So the E block was very late. In fact, they go up to 10,000. So this is very late in the E block. By April, the factory is taken over by the Allies. The last of the guns put together for the war was the F block. So midway through the F block, the Allies took over, and there were enough parts in the Mauser factory to put together guns all the way up to the L block. Most of those were put together by the French or the people that they hired to put them together, but just keep in mind, from the F block all the way to the L block, they put together guns from leftover parts. Many times you'll see they have a French star on them, and also some of the parts will have a Waffen stamp. So the parts were in the factory, and then the French continued putting them together, or whoever they hired. I don't want to say the French soldiers put them together, but there were plenty of people looking for work in Germany, and so I'm sure they hired people to come and put these together, and the last one being in the L block. Okay, I'm going to show you this. This is not part of the bring back paper guns, but this also came in. Just thought I'd show it to you. This is a Happy Thanksgiving to me. Beautiful party leader with a spare magazine, would be banner only. But that's for another day. Just happened to have come in today. Okay, the next assembly of items, and you can see them laid out here. There's quite an assembly. It was a local woman drove it over, and it was her uncle. And her uncle was in the war. She mentioned that her uncle never talked about the war, but that he had seen a lot and lost several of his buddies. So she brought in the gun because she wanted to move it along to a collector. As she said, nobody here really wants the gun, and we would rather see a collector get it who really will honor the memory of her uncle. So when we asked her more questions and said, could you bring in some more things? Not all of this will be included, but she allowed me to borrow it for the video. some of it the family wants to keep. But this is the assembly that she put together, including some letters, what I would call a unit book, and some other things. But let's take a look at the gun, and then I'll show you some of the other items that she brought for us to look at. This is the holster, and it's interesting because it is a paper holster. Well, let's take a closer look. Now, I've talked about these paper holsters before. This is a late war paper holster. It's not marked in any way. That indentation that stays in there permanently. This is leather, by the way. And if you try to lift this, you can only go about that high. It's just stiff as a board because it is paper, layers of paper glued together. The reason I say late war, this was actually experimental earlier, but late war they were running out of materials such as leather, and so they found other ways of making holsters. Not real well made, but it does work. And that you can see, again, the layers of paper all glued together, and then it hardens, and over time it just becomes hard to open, as I said before. And if I force it, they liable to crack right along here. But this is the holster that came with it, I'm sure. By the way, this is Robert Hummel, Corporate Robert Hummel. I'll tell you a little bit more about his story when we go through some of the accessories. And this is the gun that he brought back. Now, he was part of the campaign in Sicily and Italy, then into France, and eventually into Germany. Probably picked up toward the end of the war for all the reasons that I've already mentioned. But Spanish-made Astra, and this is from about 1941, so before the Nazi contract. I'll talk about that a little bit, but first you can see it's 380, like 9mm, but a 9mm Kurtz or short. 380 is the round, so they have here 9mm and 380. This was sold commercially. This is not a military gun. It has the black Bakelite grips. That was a commercial feature. So what I would guess is that this was sold privately sold in Germany before the war, again, 1941. So actually, during the war, it was sold to Germany. And then after that, there was a contract. The Germans contracted with Astra to send them Astra 300s along with other guns. But the Astra 300, the ones that were part of the military contract, you can see the Waffen stamp. These have the wooden grips instead of the plastic. You can see the Waffen stamp on the tang. These came in 7.65, but also 380. They came in both calibers. We have sold the Astra 300 and then also the Astra 600, which is a much bigger pistol, and you can see one here again with the Waffen stamp. So this was not a situation where the Germans occupied the factory. In fact, they were, Spain was officially neutral, but they did lean toward the Nazi Party and therefore supplied arms to the German government during the war. This is the capture paper. You do see his name, Robert Hummel Jr., and that's his commanding officer. Again, true to what I've said before. This was from September 21st. It's a different style of capture paper, but I have seen this before. It mentions the pistol, the camera, and a knife. The pistol is the Astra, and the camera is not with it. And I'll just comment that often when I get capture papers, it'll say camera or knife, but those things are gone. A lot of times the camera was used by the family that brought it back, but because the technology changed, maybe they just threw away the camera. But it's very unusual for me to find a pistol and a camera still together. I do, maybe 50% of the time, we'll see the pistol and the knife together, and sure enough, this is the knife that the niece mentioned that he came home with. This is what we call a gravity knife. It gets its name from the fact that it's a very simple design, and it works on gravity. So this lever, it works like that and then locks in place. There's the maker. And this is also known as a Luftwaffe gravity knife because these were issued to the Luftwaffe. The way they drop is by gravity again when you push that lever in. This one is a little bit stiff, but again, it won't come out until you push the lever. Gravity sets it down, and then gravity puts it back into the sheath or the handle. Now they also have a pick involved. This one is missing a part because it's kind of loose. It should be on a spring. It shouldn't work like that. So there's definitely a piece missing in there. But what's interesting to note is on these gravity knives issued to the Luftwaffe, you do see an L2 proof right here, which is very similar to a late war Krieghoff, or also the back of a Femeru holster. Remember, they went to the Luftwaffe. So anything that was issued to the Luftwaffe will have a L2 proof similar to that. So it's basically an eagle with an L tooth. That was the inspector proof that it was issued to the Luftwaffe. So that should be found on a gravity knife that was issued to the Luftwaffe. Again, this part is missing a spring, but that pick, I'm not sure what they do with that. Maybe they use it to pick their teeth, but obviously it's good for punching a hole. But if you're going to do that, just use the knife if you want to stab somebody. So a Luftwaffe gravity knife, and these will come together and be for sale as a group. We'll start off with his dog tags, and I find dog tags a little bit hard to read, but there's his name, Robert Hummel. He went by Bobby, by the way, and that's his military number. So we have his dog tags and also a saint medal. I do conclude that he was a fairly devout Catholic. Not only because of this, but some of the things that he said in his letters home to Mom and his brother. And then also he saved from Munich after the war was over. They did a massive Thanksgiving. This is appropriate because tomorrow's Thanksgiving in the King's Plaza. So they had a mass and celebration. He saved the program along with some articles and some information about the importance of the Lord's Day. And these are the people that participated. So again, I think he was a devout Catholic from things that he said. Also, we see different newspapers that he sent home. One of them is in the 45th Division. This is about the Sicily invasion and then the Anzio invasion all the way up to Salerno, Naples, and eventually into Rome. This was his unit marking, which would have been the patch on his uniform. He also has the big red one, which is a storied unit, and there's a good movie about that. For a period of time, and certainly the Sicily invasion, from what I can tell, he went into service in March of 43 through boot camp by June, and then the Sicily invasion. He would not have been part of the North Africa campaign, but certainly he was out of boot camp and into the war by the time Sicily was invaded in July. Sicily invasion ended in August, and then from there they did their landing into Italy. But these were unit markings. I started to say the Sicily campaign and North Africa. The general overseeing all of that, of course, was Patton, and it is portrayed, especially the Sicily campaign, is portrayed in the movie Patton. I mentioned boot camp. This is Camp Butner, a brochure that they put together in North Carolina, and it just shows different pictures from the camp. Good history. He held on to that, saved it, and I'm glad he did. Some interesting pictures you can go through. This is a little out of sequence, but when it was all over, this is almost like your high school or college yearbook, but this would have been when the war was over in 1946. A lot of the units and the 45th Infantry Division had their own book of what they did during the war, and there's a lot of maps in here that fold out, and a lot of pictures, of course, all in black and white. But I thought it was best to go over the chapters. Africa, I don't think that Robert Hummel participated in that, but Sicily, he most likely was part of that campaign. Salerno, there was a winter combat warfare, and then into Anzio, which was particularly bloody. And again, he said, his family said he saw a lot and saw some of his friends die. There was a stalemate before because the Germans counterattacked and kept them out of Rome, but at some point, finally, Rome fell. From there, they went into France, and I have another map that I'm going to show you that he sent home. And then into Germany, we see the Siegfried Line and the Rhine. They took Nuremberg, He was part of the liberation of Dachau. Again, there's no information in the stuff that he kept. At the end of the war, he ended up in Munich, and it looks like he spent some time there, and I will go over that with you about his time in Munich. This is just a random Nazi flag that he brought home. A lot of times people would have these signed by the people in their platoon. This one is not signed, but it is a Nazi flag. Another booklet that he brought home, and this is just the road to Rome. There's his unit. These are probably all of the units that were involved in the taking of Rome. They called that the Southern Front, the underbelly of the Third Reich. And that was a long and arduous journey before they landed in Normandy. And there's just, this is just filled with really cool. Oh, there's a Thompson submachine gun. Like, see that canteen? Look at this. Probably not the same one, but this came with the stuff that his niece brought us. That's their canteen / mess kit. Actually, there's his canteen. That's more like the mess kit. I know some of you military guys will correct me, and thank you for that. I apologize for my not knowing the proper terminology. But yeah, this is just a really interesting booklet. And again, I believe most of this will be sold altogether. The pictures that I have here of Robert, different pictures of him. Looks like he was issued an M1 Garand. I was kind of wondering what gun did he carry. He carried the M1 Garand, couple pictures there. There is one, I presume, with his mother, and he writes a letter to his mother. Here's the letter to his mother. You can tell because it says, "Dear Mother." And this reminds me of my own writing to my mother. It says, "I'm very sorry that I did not write sooner." That's how you start every conversation with your mother. "Sorry, I haven't seen you in a while." And then he goes on and talks a little bit. This is actually from Camp Butner. And he talks about training. It's interesting because he mentions that they're up at 6 o'clock and they hike every day, work out every day from 6 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock at night, and then they have chow. And then he mentions he has Sundays off, so he looks forward to his Sundays off. He also asks about somebody, Bernie, that's his brother. Bernie got together with his girlfriend, Jane. So I was really glad to hear that. Speaking of Bernie, I assume this is a picture of his younger brother, Bernie, and here he has a letter dated April. So again, he's still in boot camp. They work the hell out of us from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. So a little bit about boot camp. It also said in boot camp he was getting $12 a month. They also took out $1.50 for laundry, and then another $12.80 for insurance. I guess that's in case you die in boot camp or during the war. You wanted to make sure your insurance was paid up. Now, I talked to my dad yesterday. My dad's 94. He was in the Navy, and he said when he left the Navy in 1945, he was getting $42 a month. So that's a lot better than the $12. I think it goes up if you're in combat. And then by the end of the war, it had increased significantly. You can see that your loving brother Bobby, so he went by the name Bobby. On a very self-centered note, you can see that he was writing to Morris Road in Ardmore. I actually know exactly where that is. I grew up in Havertown, and I went to high school. Ardmore was the neighboring town, and people from Ardmore went to my high school. So Robert was old enough that I would not have known him from high school, but if in high school, if he went to the public school, it would have been the same high school that I went to, and I have been on Morris Road in Ardmore, PA. Also, let's take a look at this huge map. I have it kind of laid out. On the one side, I think this is a military map that was captured. Because all of the railroads, all the roads are marked, the rivers, it looks like a military map. And then if you see these blue, like angles, it looks like, well, it talks about the elevation and the view. It couldn't all be gun emplacements, but it is 4 gun emplacements where you can overlook the different valleys. This is mostly northern Italy, but off to the right, you can see a little bit of Yugoslavia. And you can see Venice. Venice in northern Italy, but then also up here, a little further up, you see Munich, and that's where he ended up. So if we turn it over, we can see that he just all he did was mail it home. It was approved by the military, so I'm thinking after the war, they had a lot of these military-style maps captured from the Germans. Great intelligence during the war, but now that the war was over, they were either sold or given out as souvenirs. So he mailed it home, and you can see it was approved by the Army to be sent home. So in other words, it got past the censors that said it was top secret, but now it's not. So he sent this map home to Ardmore, Pennsylvania. One other thing about the map, it's made of cloth. And that, of course, is so in the pouring down rain, you could still dry it out and use it, where if it was paper, it would basically disintegrate in the rain. Just real quickly, a couple odds and ends. These are all his campaign ribbons. We've kind of laid them out for you. A good conduct medal, which was fairly common. If you conducted yourself well, you would get a good conduct medal. The ribbons were the different campaigns that he participated in. Probably most notably is the Purple Heart. So at some point he was wounded. It does have a little note inside it, and there is the Purple Heart that he received. I have no information about how or when or what the nature of his wound was, but we do see that he was issued the Purple Heart. And just some what I find historically interesting, not a big deal, but if you take a look at this certificate. So he didn't come home till after September. Remember the capture paper, he was still in theater, European theater, based in Munich. He attended a 2-week class, 42 hours, on shoemaking. So I talked before about the war was hellish and hectic, but when the war was over, there's a lot of free time sitting around, nothing to do, waiting to go home. And in this case, the Army actually had an educational program and provided classes, be like adult evening school today. And he attended this class, 42 hours on shoemaking. I have no idea why he was interested in that, but he signed up and got a certificate of completion, and that was in June of 1945. So that happened in Munich. One other thing that happened in Munich is he may have met a special friend. I think this is Edelweiss. This is a memory from Munich. There's just a stamp here from, I think, the retail store. It probably had some significance to him because he kept it all these years. And this little note, I assume, is written by a German and maybe a special friend. But again, I think this is Edelweiss. This white flower shall remember you on the time in Munich. So the English is a little bit off, but I would assume that this was a German, maybe a female type friend. He was there for several months and maybe met somebody and kept this as a memory. It is growing only in the mountains of Munich. Cheer up and be a good boy. Now that sounds like his mother, but I don't think this is from his mother. So anyway, I just found these to be interesting, and they kept this as a memory of his time in Munich after the war. Okay, for my last GI bring back, I have a unique gun I want to show you. It's a very small assembly. You can take a look at what came back with this gun. This is a pennant and some kind of a cloth that I'm not sure if that's a headband or an armband. It would be a very small one. There's a little bit about the unit that this soldier was in, the Cross of Lorraine Division, which is an infantry division, the 79th, and we'll say a little bit more about that. But there's some souvenirs here from Germany, and this SA belt buckle, and the anti-aircraft badge, and some coins, Nazi coins, which are worthless today. But so this is a very small assemblage, and there is one purse. We'll take a look at this. This purse, probably custom ordered somewhere in Europe. Could have been Germany or France, since he spent time in both. Maybe in a souvenir that he sent home, but this was specially made because that is the Cross of Lorraine, which was his unit, the 79th. Also, this gift item, which is the size of a bracelet. I believe that would be considered scrimshaw. So this was sent home as a souvenir or brought home at the end of the war as a gift to a mother, girlfriend, or wife. And this stayed together with the items he brought home. So who is he? So unfortunately, I don't have very much CE, and you can't even, you'd have a hard time reading that. I think it is Frace. Because if I go to the book, the little booklet on the Lorraine division, his name is printed a little more clearly here, and I'm going to say F-R-A-E-S-S, Frace. And then he had it signed by a lot of his, probably the guys in his squad. I can certainly read John Thompson, and here's Clyde and Leslie Fitzgerald from South Carolina. We see Philadelphia, Massachusetts. There's Kentucky. His buddies from his squad, most likely, signed. And this was his unit booklet. So maybe at the end of the war, they got together for a little reunion. Staff Sergeant, I'm going to say Frace. Again, end of the war, except this is a little bit earlier, June 28 of 1945. I mentioned I have seen a lot of capture papers. That is the serial number of the gun. It happens to be a P-38. A lot of them that say camera. In this case, it actually came home with a camera. I believe this is the only time I saw a capture paper that said camera that actually had a camera. I'll do that last, but that is a German-made Voigtlander, and I'll show you that. I know absolutely nothing about cameras, but I figured out how to open it, so I'll show you that. But what I really wanted to show you is the gun. I don't know very much at all about this guy, and it just came from a collector who did not get it from the family of the vet. I think he got it in an auction. So we don't know the history. If any of you can track anything down, we haven't found anything about this particular GI, C.E. Frace. But we do know his division, the Lorraine Division. It was part of the Normandy invasion. Then they went up to Cherbourg, France, and on their way to Paris, they were known for taking a lot of prisoners. I think when they cut them off here in this peninsula, I believe they took about 100,000 prisoners. Some of you will correct me on that, but that's just going from memory. They did take a lot of prisoners. They also they went through Paris, but it looks like when they first came through Paris, I remember they wanted the French to liberate the city, and that's what they did. They told the GIs to stay out, at least in the beginning. So almost as a comical thing, says no trespassing, can't enter, no, not for you, off limits, stay out, no soldiers. So all that is to say they did not feel welcome in Paris, even though they were instrumental in liberating the city. They bypassed it, but later on, I'm sure he had leave in Paris and maybe even picked up that little purse in Paris. I'm not sure. But then they went up through Belgium and across the Siegfried Line and into Germany. So that's a little bit about the trail of the 79th through France. So here's what I really wanted to show you. This is the P-38, obviously the holster. And on the back, it is Waffen stamped, maker marked, which looks like JXY. They usually are marked P-38, as opposed to the Luger, which would usually be P-08. And then the date is 1944. The gun itself is unique in one way, but this is an AC, very, very faint, but you do see AC-44, AC being the Walther factory, unlike the first one I just showed you, which was Mauser factory, SVW. This is a AC-44, and the serial number you can see matches the serial number on the capture paper. Now, the reason I thought this was cool, check this out. You can see that you can cut yourself on it. You notice the trigger? And of course you can notice the trigger guard. So what does that remind you of, or what does that make you think of? Of course, I think of the Western movies where the guy pulls his gun, and if it's Clint Eastwood, he shoots the gun right out of his hand. We actually have, in a Sherlock Holmes movie, I think it was the evil Dr. Moriarty, was going to kill Sherlock Holmes, but the police stopped him just in time.
This is only the coup de grace.
Stand still, Moriarty, you're done for.
And the reason I think that this gun was drawn, if this is the original holster, there's no name on it, at least not one that I can distinguish. But if it was in the holster at the time that this was shot or hit with shrapnel, it would have a hole right here. I actually did have a holster with a hole in it. It was actually up here, but it was in the frame. A hole in it here, and then a big hole right in the side. So it had been shot and brought back. This one At least this holster was added later, or it was definitely not in the holster because there's no mark here. The nature of this, we'll call it a wound, nature of this wound looks more like shrapnel than a bullet. This here, this big chunk here, and then it looks like it came in from this direction, broke off the trigger guard. So this is not something you see every day. It's just a P-38 with a capture paper brought home. If you could bring home a good P-38, why would you want to damage P-38? And the only reason I can think of is this had some significance to C.E. Frace, and he brought it home as a memento, maybe found on a battlefield with either shrapnel or a bullet, or it was some kind of a battle that he was involved in, and probably brought it home to say, I'm thankful to be alive, and this is a reminder how close it came. Just to do a little bit more history, obviously, it's 9mm. You can see the milling marks because it's late. It's actually mid to late 44. In this case, it would be Eagle 359 in two places, and then the test firing proof here. There's also proof marks internally, and the magazine is marked P-38, and on the spine, there's also an Eagle 359. So it's a Walther magazine with a Walther pistol, correct Walther grips. And so everything on this is correct except for the broken shrapnel or bullet wound. Okay, I already confessed I know nothing about these cameras, but Voigtlander, some of you will give me some history. Some people are camera collectors. I'm not. I know you can roll the film here. There was no film in it. I wish there was. I think I mentioned people brought these home because the Germans were renowned for their excellence in cameras. They had some of the best cameras in the world. Kind of like getting a German automobile. When people went over there, they all said, I want to bring home a gun and a camera. But after a few years, the gun is still valuable, but the camera, it doesn't work anymore, and the technology has changed. So first and foremost, this is the sight that you would look through like that. And how do you take a picture? I did figure this out. Watch this. This is very cool. Pop this button, and the whole thing folds out. Isn't that cool? I believe this is how we take a picture. You do see the name. I see landscape. For the Germans out there, you thought my German was not that good. Landscape, group, and portrait. See, I really do know German. Ich bin der Dr. Eisenbart, Willi Willi Wick Boom Boom. See, I did take German and I learned that. Ich bin der Dr. Eisenbart, Willi Willi Wick Boom Boom. As far as I know, this would still work. Line it up and take the picture by pushing this, but I don't know that for sure. The fact that it all folds back together is very cool. These little levers, I'm going to push those down, and look at that. The whole thing, it takes my glove with it, but the whole thing folds in. It's a neat little package. Let's pop it open one more time. A Voigtlander camera comes with a wounded P-38. Hey, thank you for watching. I can't do a video like this without thanking our vets, those who are alive and those who have passed before. We really honor and are very thankful for our freedoms that we enjoy today because of those who fought and many who died to preserve our freedoms. Also, I'm thankful for all of you. Once again, I hope you have a great Thanksgiving, and make sure you like and subscribe to our channel because I've got a lot of interesting guns coming in.